I've always, perhaps naively, believed what society teaches us, that women are the gentler sex, the weaker sex. But when you hear about a woman who stabs a man to death 40 times, it's almost incomprehensible. Here in the state of Indiana, behind razor wire and reinforced steel, are two facilities that house some of the most dangerous women in the United States. At the Indiana Women's Prison and Rockville Correctional Facility, over 1,800 women are incarcerated, many for violent crimes that defy expectation. Some of these women are mothers, some are former professionals, many are serving life sentences. All of them have a story. For the next 4 weeks, I was given rare access to a world most people will never see. A place where violence, regret, and survival are part of everyday life. A place that challenges everything you think you know about women and about prison. Just south of Chicago, across the quiet farmland of Indiana, lie two of the most secure women's prisons in America. Rockville Correctional Facility, located in Park County, is the largest women's prison in the state. It houses over 1,200 inmates, many of them convicted of serious, often violent crimes. Some are serving multi-decade sentences, others, life. About an hour away in Indianapolis stands the Indiana Women's Prison, the oldest facility of its kind in the United States. Built in 1873, it holds several hundred women in a more compact, heavily fortified setting. These facilities are not short-term holding centers. They are long-term homes for women who have often spent years navigating the criminal justice system, and who, in many cases, will never leave. Their world is rigidly structured. Head counts, meal times, lockdowns, and security checks define each day. The routines are strict, but the emotions inside run deep. Grief, guilt, anger, hope. Within these walls are women capable of unimaginable violence, but also women trying, desperately, to change. This is the place where punishment meets identity, where the line between inmate and individual is constantly tested. Among the most notorious inmates in Indiana's prison system is Jo Pender, a woman once labeled by U.S. Marshals as America's most wanted female fugitive. Convicted of double murder in 2002, her story took an even darker turn 6 years later. When she did what no one thought possible, she escaped. Pender is currently held in administrative segregation, a type of long-term solitary confinement reserved for inmates deemed too dangerous or disruptive for the general population. She's been there longer than any other woman in the state, not because of her original crime, but because of what came after. In 2008, Jo Pender managed to walk out of Rockville Correctional Facility with the help of Officer Scott Spittler, a prison guard she had manipulated over time. Their relationship started with small contraband smuggling, letters, favors, and eventually money. But it quickly escalated into something far more dangerous. Spittler not only agreed to help her escape, he personally drove her off the prison grounds in a state van. It was bold, premeditated, and humiliating for the Department of Correction. For over 4 months, Sarah remained at large, eventually captured in Chicago after being featured on America's Most Wanted. The escape exposed deep flaws in prison security, and even deeper questions about influence and manipulation. Staff at Rockville described Sarah as unusually persuasive, able to pinpoint weakness and exploit it with chilling precision. They called her a master manipulator, someone capable of controlling people from within the system. Her punishment was swift and severe. Since her recapture, she has lived in near-total isolation, no physical contact with other inmates, no outdoor recreation, no access to group programs. Just a single cell, 4 gray walls, and the daily silence of segregation. For Sarah, the label Mastermind has followed her ever since. She maintains her innocence in the original double homicide, but does not deny orchestrating the escape. In her own writings, she refers to it as a desperate act of agency, a way to regain control in a place designed to erase identity. But, to prison authorities, her actions were something else entirely. Calculated, dangerous, and unforgivable. Her story continues to divide opinion. Was she a cold-blooded manipulator, or a woman shaped by desperation and control? The truth, like the prison gates she once slipped through, remains tightly locked behind institutional walls. To understand the depth of Jo Pender's escape, it's not enough to study her plan. You have to look at the man she convinced to open the door. Officer Scott Spittler was not a hardened criminal. He was a corrections officer, trained, uniformed, and trusted. But in the eyes of his colleagues, he made one critical mistake. He let his emotions get involved. According to senior prison staff, Spittler was struggling in his personal life. His marriage was falling apart. He was looking for connection, for someone to see him, not as a guard, but as a man. And Sarah Jo Pender saw the gap. She read it like a script. She began slowly. Notes, small conversations, glances. She flattered him, listened to him, gave him what he was missing on the outside. And once the emotional hook was set, the manipulation deepened. Smuggling turned into favors, favors turned into plans. Those who worked with Spittler saw the change, but not the cause. He became distracted, inconsistent. By the time the truth came out, it was too late. Pender had vanished, and Spittler had been caught on surveillance escorting her to freedom. To staff like Sergeant McPherson and Lieutenant Gray, the fallout was personal. It wasn't just about an inmate escaping. It was about trust being broken from within. They described Pender not as violent, but as strategic. Her power wasn't in force, it was in finesse. She didn't overpower the system. She seduced it. In the aftermath, prison protocol was overhauled. But the lesson remains, not all threats come with weapons. Some walk out of prison in plain sight because they knew how to find the weakest link and pull it. Inside Indiana's prison system, few inmates are watched more closely or kept more alone than Sarah Jo Pender. Since her 2008 escape and eventual recapture, she has spent over a decade in administrative segregation, a form of long-term solitary confinement reserved for the most disruptive or high-risk inmates. Her cell is small, windowless, and bare. The door remains closed nearly 24 hours a day. Meals are slid through a slot. Communication is minimal. Contact with other inmates is non-existent. Pender's only glimpses of the outside world come through books, letters, and the passing sounds of a prison she no longer moves through. Segregation in theory is about control, but in practice, it's psychological. Days bleed into one another. The absence of human interaction becomes its own form of punishment. Over time, it dulls the senses, slows time, and begins to chip away at identity. Despite the conditions, Pender has created a strict routine. She exercises in place. She reads constantly. She writes, sometimes legal letters, sometimes reflections, always with sharp detail. Staff say she remains highly intelligent, articulate, and composed. But there are signs of emotional wear, a growing quietness, a distance in the eyes. Prison officials maintain that her placement is necessary. Not for the crime she was convicted of, but for the breach of trust that followed. The manipulation of a corrections officer, the embarrassment of an escape, and the fear of what might happen if she tried again. In the prison's broader population, stories about Sarah still circulate. To some, she's a legend. To others, a cautionary tale. But to the state, she remains a symbol of what happens when charisma turns into control, and what must be done to keep it contained. In one of the lower security units at Rockville, a 28-year-old woman named Addie folds prison-issued clothes with quiet focus. She is one of the newest arrivals, and one of the youngest mothers in the facility. Addie's story, like many others here, did not begin with violence. It began with neglect. Raised in a fractured home by a mother who spent more time in jail than out of it, Addie bounced between foster care placements before dropping out of school at 16. By 19, she had 2 children and no stable support system. Drugs became a way to numb the instability. A series of poor choices led to worse ones. And then came the night that changed everything. One robbery. One fatal shot fired, not by Addie, but by someone she was with. But under the law of felony murder, she was held equally responsible. Her sentence, 40 years. What haunts her most is not the prison walls, but the image of her children the day she was sentenced. Her daughter was 6, her son just 3. Addie speaks of them often in her journal. She dreams about reading to them, combing her daughter's hair, seeing their faces when they graduate school. But here, those moments only exist in memory. Despite the weight of her sentence, Addie is trying to break a cycle she knows too well. She's enrolled in parenting classes. She writes letters home every week, even when she doesn't get a reply. She keeps drawings on the wall, crayon-colored stick figures holding hands beneath a paper sun. Staff describe her as quiet, cooperative, and deeply remorseful, but also as someone who carries pain like a shadow. One officer said, "You can see it in her. She's terrified her kids will end up here too." Addie's presence in Rockville is a reminder of how the prison system often catches not just individuals, but generations. Trauma becomes legacy, silence becomes survival. And sometimes, a woman like Addie must do something impossible. Try to become a better mother, from behind a locked door. Life inside Rockville Correctional Facility runs on a strict rhythm. Every day begins early. Wake-up calls echo through the cell blocks at 5:30 a.m., followed by roll call, showers, and breakfast in the communal hall. Meals are brief, efficient, and consumed in silence more often than conversation. After breakfast, the women disperse to their assigned programs. Some work in the kitchen. Others clean the facility or attend GED classes. A select few are enrolled in rehabilitation courses, parenting, anger management, addiction recovery. Time here is rigidly structured. Inactivity is not an option. Inside Unit 13, one of the larger housing blocks, inmates make their beds with military precision. Personal items are limited to what can fit in a single plastic bin. The atmosphere is tense, but quiet. Every woman here knows the rules and what it costs to break them. Recreation time is limited but valued. A concrete yard serves as both exercise ground and emotional outlet. Women walk laps, lift makeshift weights, or sit in small groups talking about family, court dates, or dreams of release. These are the rare moments when the prison feels less like a machine and more like a community. Yet even in these moments of calm, there's a constant undercurrent of survival. Trust is scarce. Words are chosen carefully. For many inmates, vulnerability can be dangerous. Some spend their evenings writing letters. Others read or watch the small communal television in shifts. Lights out is at 10 p.m. and the cycle begins again the next morning. Inside these walls, time moves differently. It stretches, it compresses. Days become weeks, weeks become years. But within that sameness, small acts, sharing a book, teaching someone to read, laughing over a memory, become everything. Because in a place built on punishment, even the smallest act of humanity becomes a quiet form of resistance. In a quieter corner of the prison, Martha folds laundry with the same care she's given every task for the past 2 decades. She's 61 now, her gray hair tied back, her voice soft, her hands weathered not by age, but by time. In 2 weeks, Martha will walk out of Rockville Correctional Facility for the first time in 20 years. Convicted in the early 2000s for voluntary manslaughter after a domestic dispute turned fatal, Martha has spent more than half her adult life behind bars. She is one of the longest-serving inmates in the facility and among the most respected. Officers describe her as steady. Other inmates call her Miss Martha, a figure of quiet guidance in a place often defined by chaos. But freedom, after so long, comes with its own kind of fear. Martha doesn't know how to use a smartphone. She's never sent an email. The world outside has moved on without her. Prices, technology, even language, everything is unfamiliar. She sometimes asks younger inmates to explain how things work in today's world, only to smile and shake her head in disbelief. Her biggest fear isn't survival, it's relevance. Will she find work? Will she be accepted? And more hauntingly, does anyone even remember she's still alive? She's been assigned to a transitional housing program in Indianapolis. She'll have access to job training and counseling. But reintegration isn't just about programs, it's about identity. Martha has worn the same uniform, followed the same routine, and lived by the same institutional clock for 20 years. Leaving that behind is not freedom, it's disorientation. And yet, hope remains. Every morning now, she marks a square on the calendar beside her bunk. Fewer and fewer remain. Each one feels heavier than the last. She knows she'll never get those years back. But she hopes, quietly, fiercely, that something still waits for her on the other side of the gate. Behind the razor wire and concrete walls of Rockville Correctional Facility, relationships don't just form. They evolve for survival. With no access to family, no physical contact with partners, and limited trust among peers, inmates create new forms of connection. Some emotional, others strategic, and many blurred somewhere in between. Same-sex relationships are common here. Some are deeply personal, rooted in comfort and trust. Others are transactional, a way to gain protection, food, or emotional leverage in an environment that often strips women of both dignity and control. Correctional officers refer to them quietly as gate marriages. They begin quickly, burn intensely, and often end just as fast. But within the world of prison, they can feel as real and powerful as any relationship on the outside. There are unspoken rules: who can be seen with whom, who belongs to whom. Jealousy, heartbreak, and possessiveness play out not in private bedrooms, but in shared bunks and monitored common areas. A small argument can escalate. A love triangle can result in a fight, a transfer, or segregation. And yet, despite the volatility, some of these bonds offer inmates their only source of emotional grounding. For women serving long or life sentences, having someone to talk to, hold on to, or simply exist beside becomes essential. The prison may take away time, but it cannot erase the human need to be seen. There are also friendships, real, sustaining ones. Women who braid each other's hair, who celebrate birthdays with handmade cards and commissary snacks, who protect each other during vulnerable moments. These bonds can last longer than the relationships that began outside, but trust comes slowly. Many have been betrayed before, by lovers, by families, by systems. And here, vulnerability is still a risk. One wrong word can turn a friend into a threat. One misplaced secret can become currency. Inside Rockville, relationships are not defined by gender, labels, or legality. They're defined by survival. Emotional shelter in a place designed to be cold. For many women, they are not distractions. They are the reason they're still standing. As the day winds down inside Rockville Correctional Facility, the noise softens. Doors lock, lights dim, and in the stillness, reflection begins. In her cell, Addie writes a letter to her daughter. She doesn't know if it will be read, but she writes anyway. "I want you to know," she whispers through tears, "I didn't stop being your mom just because I came here." In another unit, Martha folds her final set of uniforms. She says goodbye to the women she's mentored, some who look at her like a mother, others like a map of what not to become. She says she'll miss them. She just hopes they don't follow her out, only to find themselves walking back in. From the officer's side of the gate, the tone is different, but not without humanity. Sergeant McPherson says, "Some of these women made decisions I'll never understand, but I've seen them grow. I've seen them teach each other, lift each other, even grieve together. That's real." Lieutenant Gray adds, "We don't excuse what they've done, but we have to believe people can change. Otherwise, why are we doing any of this?" These reflections don't come with neat endings. There are no promises, no guarantees of redemption. Some women will reoffend, some won't make it, but some, perhaps more than the world expects, will go on to build something better. Behind every locked door is a story, and behind every story is a choice. Not just the ones that brought these women here, but the ones they make every single day after. They were once daughters, sisters, mothers, women whose lives at some point veered into irreversible choices. The walls of Rockville Correctional Facility do not ask why. They simply contain the consequences. But beyond the headlines, beyond the crimes, what remains is human complexity. Inside these cells are stories not just of violence and regret, but of resilience, love, longing, and the quiet struggle to begin again. Some of these women will spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Others will re-enter a world that forgot them long ago. Some find peace, others never do. But all of them, regardless of guilt or remorse, are reminders that no one is just one decision. The justice system is built to punish. But somewhere in the tension between justice and mercy, a question lingers. Can a person still matter, even after they've fallen? In these final frames, we leave Rockville not with judgment, but with reflection. Because the truth is uncomfortable. The most dangerous women in America's prisons are still women, flawed, failing, but not without capacity to be more than what the world chose to remember. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even question what justice really means, don't leave without letting us know your thoughts. We invite you to like this video, subscribe for more real stories from inside the system, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. or wants to understand why they're so rare. And in the comments below, tell us, do you believe everyone behind bars deserves a shot at redemption? We read every word. Until next time.